we're back. Let's unpack this introduction to Parmenides' Dialectic.
Wow.
Okay, this is what we're going to unpack. Therefore, from where shall we begin? And what shall we hypothesize first? Question, answer. Or if you wish, seeing that it certainly appears that we must play a reality game, I must begin from myself. So 1, reality game. I must do what? Number 1, begin from myself. Number 2, the hypothesis of myself. Number 3, by hypothesizing about the oneself. Number 4, where the one is. Number 5, where the one is not. And number 6, what must the result be? Let's write it down. He must. Parmenides. Actually, Parmenides' Dialectic. Number 1, he must begin from self. And we know the significance of the word self, altos, right? It's the ultimate. It can also be used as an adjective to describe the honorific or the being of something, beauty itself. And he said, hey, only because we're a bunch of selves here am I even going to start talking about this stuff? Am I even going to share this stuff? So begin from self. And he's going to give the hypothesis of myself. Hypothesis of myself. He thinks his self is. And that's the highest possible thing you can talk about, right? Even when we were doing the exercises from Zeno that he was doing earlier, we had to keep in mind all of these ideas are of the self in some way. They are of the self in some way. So those precondition exercises we did lead to this. By hypothesizing about the one self. So his hypothesis of myself is the one self. These are our 2 terms for the dialectic. The 2 key terms he's picking of subject and other is one and self. And already from our introduction, from our reflection on introduction, we know these are pretty much the highest possible terms. Remember when we were talking about the ideas? Beauty and justice and goodness and likeness and motion and rest. We said, oh, even these things have themselves a one. So while we have beautiful people, beautiful dogs, beautiful paintings, beautiful mountains. There must be something called beauty itself. Likewise, just things, or good things, or things in motion. There must be these ideas themselves. But you could say, even in all these ideas, they each have their own kind of separate existence. They're each one. So therefore, there must be a one. That all these have. Another way of, if you can say it, well, these aren't dumb or dead entities. They each have their own self. So you could say that they're all self. So just like many beautiful things mean there's an idea of beauty, many self-ideas means there must be a higher realm of self or one. We saw that earlier as part of the dialectic or the dialogue that they were having earlier. So what? Well, self and one are the key terms he's using in his dialectic. He's really shooting for the moon.
Wow.
So, he's beginning from himself, hypothesizing of his self. And what's his hypothesis of his self? It is the one self. So there's our two terms we can recognize as the dialectic. Remember dialectic, dia, two, lectic, the logos, or the discourse about the connection of these two things. It's a connection of two ideas so that we can understand the subject. What's the subject? Myself. I'm going to tell you what I think myself is. To explain it, I'm going to use the dialectic, which requires two key terms, a self and an other. It's S and O, remember? S to S, S to O, O to O, O to S. So this is the S and the O. Now there's a question. Normally, the thing that we're defining becomes the subject. That becomes the S. And the idea we think most significant or relevant in our reflection becomes the O. So we've got a bit of a question. He's mixing up the form a little bit. He's making this the subject. It's a dialectic on the one. Even though he's using self as the O, he's using it to define the subject, but he's mixing it up a bit. So anyway, begin from the self. That's the precondition. Hypothesis of the one self. That's his definition of the dialectic. Where the one is. We can recognize this, right? Or whether one is not. So we can see that this is the subject because these are the two categories, whether the subject exists, or doesn't exist. Now there's another puzzle here because existence normally refers to the realm of being, but he's picking the terms above the realm of being. So maybe the word is has one of those lesser, greater, ultimate kinds of expressions like the word self. Remember? Let's have a look at self again. The word self, altos, in the Greek, or self, has a lesser, a greater, Remember this? This is the word that means is like or is to. So likeness. Similar, has something the same but different, of a higher level, as an ultimate. Just like in a video game, you have your lesser abilities, you have your greater skills, and you have your ultimate that you can use every 5 minutes or something. And for self, the lesser means physical or it. The greater means being. So we could say this is also the realm of becoming, or honorific, the highest excellence of the thing. And ultimate is the self. Now, in the dialectic, we talk about if the subject is or is not. Actually, the word we used before was if it exists or if it does not exist. These are the two hypotheses, what if universes we create. Now, the word existence, we were very clear to point out that in the way that we've been talking about, exists in the way, in the being way, that is eternal, that is immortal, that is apprehended by nous, through ousia, that has the nature of ousia, that is able to be grasped through the logos and the power of the dialectics. The archetype or paradigm of which everything else somehow, in a puzzling way, participates that we don't quite understand yet. That's what exists means. But he is talking about not the realms of being, which he said were the exercises to prepare us for his dialectic, but he's talking about this realm, and he's saying whether it is or is not. Why is that significant? Well, this is above the level of being. It is beyond even existence itself. Beyond existence. So we use the word is or is not. Maybe. This is a question. We're not sure yet. It's a possibility. Does he mean if one is in this way, or does he mean is as in exists? We don't know yet. Keep that as a question. Because maybe, for the Greeks, the word is. Altos has that expression. But maybe the word is has the lesser, greater, and ultimate. You could say, my bike is. In the world of using the word is maybe could refer to bikes, could refer to existence, and maybe the word is could refer to the ultimate too. Maybe it has that lesser, greater, ultimate. That's a question. Add it to your question set. So, number 1, from self. Number 2, hypothesis of himself. This is what it means to give your hypothesis. Using your highest 2 terms, the one self that you're aware of. If, and also if one is not, and also what must the results be. What do we see here? What do we see here? Well, normally we've been seeing that number 5 actually applies to both of them. And this is just the definition at the beginning. This is the title. The first 4 is if it is, and then the next 4 is if it's not, and the results are in both of the different dialectics. So normally, there might be a way of saying that he means what must the results be for each of them, so there's only actually 4 categories, maybe. But this is weird because he's adding this at the top. He's distinguishing this as a whole different section. And then he's doing these 2 things here that involve this, that we have been exercising ourselves in. These have been our exercises we've been doing up until now. So it seems like he's adding 2 elements that are new. He's pointing at those exercises. Now what you want to do is, after you've been exercised in those 4 exercises we've done, now somehow use everything you've come to learn through those exercises to somehow speak from yourself. Apply them. You've been practicing, now it's game time. Apply them. How? Give a new hypothesis of yourself, the one self. Then do the things that you've been practicing before. Create a world in which the one is, and a world in which the world isn't, one is not. Question is 2 different from 3? Does 2 have its own separate hypothesis? Or are we saying, well, I think the self is the one self, and it exists? Uh-oh. Here is the issue. We know, or we understand, that existence refers to this. All of the exercises in the if the thing exists, if Spider-Man exists, refers to this level of being. He is talking about this one. These have been exercises. Exercise 1 was about this, the many beings, and how it relates to its cause and itself. Exercise 2 was about one of the particular beings and how it relates to the whole. Exercise 3 was one of the particular beings, how it relates to itself, all the other beings, and the whole. Exercise 4 was those things being related to how they then relate back to themselves and back to the thing. It's all in here. That's what our exercises have been. Now, Parmenides says, you know what? You're asking me to do one step higher. You want me to talk about the self. So if I do what happens if the one of the one self, because I think it's called the one self, those are the 2 terms. He could have picked anything. He could say, you know what the self is? The best way of understanding the self is the beauty itself. Didn't say that. The good self. Didn't say that. He said the one self. And we know that the one and the self are 2 terms that have an existence in this realm, as well as this realm, as well as this realm. It has scope over all of it. So he is creating one hypothesis about the one self. 2, if it exists in this sense, because that's what exists mean. And 3, if it doesn't exist. What is that? Why is that interesting? Because we've been practicing this only. This has been all of the 3 exercises. He's elevating. He's up-leveling us. He's leveling up. And it might be hard to follow along if he's right in saying, well, you know what you need to do is exercise yourself in those practices and exercises Zeno's been doing. Well, okay, let's make a pact. Let's make an adventurous pact. A promise that we will do those exercises. But we're still not going to close our ears because we're not ready for this. Let's do both. You get given 2 options, take both.
Wow.
So let's hear what he has to say about the self. The highest, the ultimate. This is the highest or the honorific. This is the ultimate. So we should put that under here. I know we've got ultimate there, so I don't have to worry. So let's hear what he has to say, even though we might not completely get it yet because we haven't done a lot of exercises, but let's take both. So it sounds like he's saying, number 1, speak from myself. Okay, that's new. Number 2, my hypothesis of the one self. Number 3, if it exists, what follows? And number 4, what if it doesn't exist, what follows? So we've got a new 4. Maybe there's an extra 5 at the end. We'll have to see. We have to see in what he does. If he does the 4 categories of if one is, and he includes what the results be for each of those, then we know that 5 is that there isn't actually a 5 as a separate thing. But maybe he does the whole thing. Whoops. Maybe he does the whole thing and then does a conclusion at the end of the whole book. And we can say, oh no, that is 5. So maybe there's 4, maybe there's 5. We've got to see where he starts. I think perhaps this introduction might be number 1. I think he's telling us number 1. Number 1, begin from yourself. What's that? The preconditions. We're all selves here. Zeno asked, it's necessary. I'm going to be speaking from myself. I'm going to give an introduction of what we're going to cover. This could be the beginning from himself. Saying that he's beginning from himself. So now we've got to ask, okay, what's the first hypothesis he talks about? This is the beginning. Then we're going to get into the first hypothesis. And then we're going to look at what one is. And there should be 4, remember? Self to self. If one is, what can we say about the one that is? Self to others, how does it relate? Those things having been affected, how do they relate to each other? And then how do they relate back to the one that is and exists? So we're using our skill tree to look for the 4 categories. What were they? These 4 here. Self to self, defining the thing, demonstrating, division, synthesis. S. So when we get into it, we've got the beginning, we're getting it now. The first hypothesis should be about the one self, which should be his hypothesis. It should be the one he actually thinks. And it's somehow coming from himself. Then he's going to talk about if the one is. So we're looking for 4. Can we see 4 hypotheses about what happens if it actually exists? What does exist mean? Has a being. His first one is the ultimate. We're looking for 4 hypotheses of this, and then a what-if universe for each of the the ways in which the one is not. If you think the one doesn't exist, what are the 4? Remember how we have to do both? Oops. Those 4. So keep those seeing glasses on. So put on your skill tree goggles, your dialectic skill tree goggles, and look for 4 if it is, and 4 if it is not. Look for the first one, which should be his hypothesis. And then we'll see if there's a 5th one at the end, or if actually each of them explains what the results, and there is only 4 categories here. These are the questions. So now we've got the beginning. So hey, whenever you meet someone who says, "Oh, you're a philosopher." "Oh, yes, I am a philosopher. It's a very, very noble thing. Yes, very good." And, "Well, actually, can you give me a dialectic? Can you give me an example of what you do?" But the highest, use your highest understanding, the dialectic, and apply it to your highest vision. There's our 2 terms: understanding and vision. Understanding and knowing. Reasoning and state of mind. There's our pair of the human quest we mentioned earlier in the series. So, by the way, tell me your highest vision and use your highest understanding to do so. Well, you say, well, okay. First, I have to give you an introduction. Number 1. To let you know the preconditions. I'm only doing this because I know you're a good person. You're not some sort of goblin or enemy or whatever is going to attack me if I start speaking in the ways that the many call empty talk or useless because they're ignorant of how important this game is. And I'm going to speak from myself. Somehow I'm going to, however way I've learnt so far to be myself most purely, that's what I'm going to speak from. And this is what I'm going to do. This is all the introduction. I'm going to tell you my hypothesis of what I think I am, using a key subject to define myself, a key descriptor. This is the word that I think I have at my disposal to best explain what I am. By the way, I'm going to explain what happens if it has an existence and being. These are the possible ways of viewing the self that are less. These are the states of mind I might fall into during the day if I lose my apprehension of the truth. And if the one isn't, well, these are the really sad states of mind I can get into. But if you have my hypothesis, if you think I am the one self, these are all the possible ways you can think of the self. Parmenides, so this will be how you would introduce that sort of thing to somebody. Now, what's interesting is we talked about, Parmenides is saying the one self. Anyone who has an idea of anything, it has to be one thing, right? To see one coffee mug, it's going to be a coffee mug, one coffee mug. Empty.
What?
Boo, coffee mug empty. So if you think you have a self, to distinguish that, this is the one thing I'm going to point to. I need an idea of one. So whatever you think the self is, it's going to have to be some kind of one. Do you think the self is a one that has parts? Do you think a self is one that has a whole? Do you think a self is one that is made up of nothing? What kind of one do you think of when you think of yourself? Parmenides is going to lay out all of the possible kinds of ones that you can have. Because it's either going to be the ultimate, it's going to be some version of a one that has a pure existence, or it's going to be some version of a one that doesn't have an existence in being. So whatever you think of the self, it's going to be one of those kinds of ones. The ultimate, one of the 4 classes of being. You're going to think it's a pure being itself. It's going to be some functioning. It's going to be a one that it functions. It's going to be it's not going to be either of those. It's going to be something to do with how we relate, having been affected, or it's going to be some way of thinking about a one that's different from the self and relates back to it in some way. I didn't say that very clearly, but that's okay. We're going to see more about that later as we read. But what he's covering is all the possible universes of oneself. If the self is some kind of one, It's either going to be the ultimate that he's going to describe, it's going to be some kind of one that exists, or it's going to be some kind of one that doesn't exist. And within each of these realms, there's going to be at least 4 major categories that we've seen in the dialectic. Remember how we said these are 4 possible ways of describing a bike, describing humanity, describing the ideas, and now the self. 4 possible ways to completely understand the one that can be applied to self. So it's complete. That's why it's so fantastic. That's why it's the greatest book. Some say it's the greatest book. Got the funny title, The Greatest Book Never Read. So it might cover every possible way of looking at the one self that anyone can have, which is important to us because we're going to get even greater admiration if we can use our understanding to help other adventurers. If there is one ultimate, 4 if the one exists, 4 if the one doesn't exist, that equals 9. So if we have 9 ways of leveling up as adventurers, and Parmenides is someone who's reached the end, the ultimate, and he's going to give us the hypothesis of the ultimate, he also said even greater admiration should be given to those who can, having reached this ultimate, can come back and guide others in a sufficiently defining way, using the logos in dialectic to sufficiently define it such that they can take this journey themselves. You're a level 9 adventurer, now you come back to level 1s and you recognize what level they're on. Oh, you're a level 1, you're a level 4, you're a level 3, and I know how to relate to you appropriately. I'm not going to give a level 1 a level 4 magic spell. It's not going to work for them. He might hurt himself, right? I'm not going to give level 3 armor to a level 2 adventurer. He's not going to be able to use it. He's not going to be able to benefit from it. In a similar way, if this covers the 9 possible ways of looking at self, because whatever you think of a self, it has to be one thing, because that's the ultimate, one of those ultimate terms that refer to everything, even beings, even beauty itself is one being, then this might be a complete system of understanding all the possible ways of viewing the self, all the possible ways of understanding, and the state of mind. Remember, vision and the understanding, the thinking and the experience, all the possible feelings or states of mind or spiritual experiences open to you at every level. What an introduction. Took some work to see it, didn't it? It took some, just like it takes some work for the thief adventurer class to be able to see traps or to see treasure that's hidden, see hidden doorways. But once you can see it, you can enjoy it, benefit from it, and use it. Took some work to see it, but it sounds like he's laying out the ultimate roadmap for personal or spiritual or human development. If there are 9, it may just be that we have to go in a journey ourselves to from level 9, level 8, level 7, level 6, to level 5, to level 4. Oh, and if there are 4 here, so these would be the 4 lowest ones, the 4 lowest levels. Level 3, level 2, to level 1. So level 1 would be the highest level. And if this is the 4 categories of what one is, we would have these 4 here, and then we have level 1, his hypothesis from himself of his self, which he is calling the one self. Maybe this is my own hypothesis. This is using the logos and my own understanding and current level of vision. This is how I am thinking, or think it might be likely that we might see it. But it's just a question. Get your own questions. Whatever you're thinking, don't just take mine. whatever you're thinking so far about the logos, about the dialectic, about the ultimate, about being, about particulars, about meaning, about what he's doing, about how he's relating to Socrates and Zeno. Take all of those and make your own hypothesis. Make a bunch of questions. That's the preparation. This is the beginning part. From yourself. What are your own questions from yourself? Make a bunch. What are your own hypotheses of what will happen? Make a bunch. Take them with you. Because next time we're going to get into the whole thing. We're going to get into his dialectic. Of what? His self. Using what? One and self as self and other. As the terms. Is he just going to give the one? Nope, he's going to give all the other ones that are different from him. All the ones that think that if the one is, and all the ones that think that if the one is not. And the results. It's going to be more fun if you have your own questions. It's going to be more fun if you have your own puzzles, your own hypothesis, and you're not certain, you're taking them with you. It's going to open things up. It's going to spark insights. It's going to make connections. It's going to make it more interesting and fun and meaningful to you. That's part of being a true adventurer, right? Frodo doesn't just leave the Shire for no reason. He has an idea of what he wants to do. I have an idea that I'm going to go to Mordor and go to the volcano and stuff. I have an idea that my friends are going to help me. I have a theory that Gandalf is going to help give me some magical items or something. He has a bunch of questions. He has a bunch of theories. He has a bunch of ideas. He doesn't know yet, but he can take it with him. We're doing the same. We have a bunch of skills we can take with us. A higher skill, the skill of dialectic. We have a bunch of abilities in our ability trees. We can look for ones, we can look for twos, we can look for threes, we can look for fours. So we have some skills. We have a high skill of the dialectic, a high ability. And we also have to take with us questions and hypotheses. That's what it means to be a true adventurer. That's the archetype of all other adventure games and movies and things. So do that. Think about it, sleep on it, talk to your friends, talk to your cat, talk to anyone who's interested in this, and come up with some. Take them with you. We're going to have some fun. Join me next time, and we're going to get into this guy, Parmenides. Thank you, Socrates, for asking the hard question. Tricky. For being a sneaky hobbitses. Thank you, Zeno, for siding with us. And thank you, Parmenides, for giving us this introduction and laying it all out for us. Let's get into it next time. I hope you're finding this fun. I hope you're finding this interesting. I hope to see you next time. All the best.